Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 55 of the Unchained Vodcast. We have our usual crew here today, and today we're going to talk about the importance of guilds in beta testing. This is going to be our final episode of this season, which I think is season 3. We don't really keep that
Four.
good of tabs of it. Is it season 4?
Pretty sure
I don't know.
4.
Season 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
We don't know how long the break is going to be exactly, because beta 1 is theoretically supposed to start in just a little over a month.
39 days.
So we may come back for like one episode to talk about beta and then go back on break, because usually we take about like a 2-month break in between seasons. But we don't know yet. We'll let you know, especially once the forums get back up.
Yeah,
and we have a nice, clean, squeaky clean, blank forum to post in.
Blank.
Which
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to, but
In case you guys missed it, we don't have forums anymore.
Yep.
yeah. If you haven't been paying
Apparently
attention,
they're gonna be better.
the forums are gone. They are coming back in, I think, a couple of days.
Something like
Bigger, better.
Yeah, I don't think they're supposed to be gone that
Nicer.
long, but should be this week, I think.
Some rumors say with forum badges even.
that. What is Medic going to do?
Forum badge. Oh god, it already melted. What? Oh, my post! No. I didn't have that many posts, so I'm not heartbroken. Just about a few.
Yeah.
I'm sure Sacrix has quite a few topics already ready to just copy and paste.
That it would have been nice to have a couple of days forewarning
Yeah.
to copy and paste some things so that we could save them, but oh well, it's done now.
Mm.
One of us is listening to the stream, not me. Thank you for letting us know.
Yeah.
Somebody's got audio echoing back in here. How dare you?
Weird.
That or maybe
maybe Swazi has 2 windows open.
actually I can kind of hear it, so I know what he's talking about. It's just very quiet on my side.
Okay, that's weird.
I was hearing something. That or maybe it's Kriss breathing in the microphone.
I'm not. That's why I have it so loud, so low under my.
here.
I don't know. Either way,
That sounded fine here.
We
should be good.
Let's go ahead and start on our topic. The first thing I wanted to discuss was play experience, and that it would have been nice. It would have actually been nice if we had our guest on here for this, because I know your play experience fairly well for the most part. This question's not for you guys, but for chat as well and for y'all. What games have you played in a beta test with a guild versus other games that you've play tested before without being in a guild, or rather, even if you were in a guild, your guild was not really cohesively involved?
Sure. I've only had one as a guild, which was SWOTOR.
That was my example.
It's I'm sorry I took it. But that was fun, I think, on the guild experience for beta, because our entire community, which was only for that game at the time, it wasn't quite branching out into other games yet. We all got in. We had our entire guild of 90 plus members at the time, I believe, all playing beta together, doing all the things you do in beta. It was really fun.
So good.
Yeah.
And for me, that was actually ESO with Vokendine. Also, I was mostly before that. I was in betas on my own, and only joined guild later after launch, when I was more familiar with the game. But that's also why I joined Vokendine early, to be in the test, and to be able to test a game that was supposedly guild focused. Yeah. Let's not dwell on that.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed, because I've played a number of beta tests by myself, more or less. World of Warcraft, I beta tested that pretty much solo. Guild Wars 1, just the first couple that pop into my head. Star Wars: The Old Republic was the first one I'd ever actually played with a guild primarily, and what I found was I beta tested that a lot more than I did either Guild Wars 1 or
Yeah.
World of Warcraft. Neither one of those. I got in a little bit, and I'd go and I'd play a little bit, and then I'd log off and whatever. But I mostly just kind of messed around. Whereas with Star Wars: The Old Republic, we were getting in as groups. We were actually logging in at the same time, making actual scheduled events to get in.
Right.
And more so, it was also fun because when we got into the battlegrounds and everything, we kicked the living crap out of everybody
That too.
to the point where they were rage
So
quitting when we
much.
logged into the battleground.
Yeah, we
And
had
so
quite the name going into the live game.
the um that just made it more enjoyable because you go in there, they're like, oh, look at him run.
People would be like, Genjidai again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you have a better testing experience also with the guild,
You
in
do.
my opinion, because we were also focusing, um, from what I remember in ESO, we were focusing also on finding bugs,
Hmm.
and testing the mechanics and trying to give
Hmm.
feedback to the devs, constructive feedback with a group experience,
Mhm.
which most of the time they don't really get because a lot of the beta testers are actually very much solo oriented.
Yeah.
So
And we're gonna
getting a feedback from a group is usually better also.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into the differences and why we need the groups and the guilds cohesively in the testing. What the differences are with the results that they should get. Um, we That's actually, I think, my next question.
There you
uh,
go.
Ryan said he's had more fun testing it in guild, which as I said, I can agree to. I mean, I've had fun
Likewise.
soloing in some contexts. Like, it's hard to explore a map in a group.
Yes.
Because other people don't want to necessarily do that. Whereas Guild Wars 1, that's what I ended up doing a lot of solo, was exploring their map and just looking for stuff. And looking for things that were weird or broken or weren't correct. Whereas with WoW, I ended up not really beta testing most of the content. I ended up role playing most of the time in beta. Um, not even with people. I was like standing in random areas,
Tables.
emoting and RPing to random people that came into town. Uh, just being a pest.
Yeah. And it boils down to the context of the test too. Some tests,
Mhm.
like what we've seen so far in CU, have really no reason to encourage specific group play yet. We haven't gotten that far.
Yeah.
So most of the people you see, especially during those, for me, 9 in the morning tests on a weekend or on a weekday,
Yeah.
very few people getting on. They happen to be home at a time that they're opening up the servers. You see a lot, mostly solo play at this point.
Yeah.
Um, so what would you say, from the player perspective? What would you say is the difference, or some of the key differences in testing between testing solo and testing in groups?
Uh, the biggest word, balance. There are a lot of universal things to an MMO that you can do regardless, whether it's group versus solo. The key difference is, uh, again, really the context of what you're doing when you're making a
Yeah.
PvP entirely game like CU is. Uh, balance, team balance, a team based organization like uh, any MMO, battlegrounds, whatever you call it, battlegrounds, war zones, or even open world environments, it's class balance and synergy in a group.
Yeah. And testing with a guild like that, you have the coordination to try different group combinations to see how they work. And um, I noticed that a lot of, and I was guilty of that in several games also, that a lot of the solo testers are not actually testing the game. They're pre-playing the game to get a leg up on the launch with the knowledge they get on the world, on the mechanics,
I
on
do
the
think
best
guilds are
leveling
guilty of that
experience.
too, though.
Oh
Sometimes,
yeah, no,
Yeah, well,
definitely.
yes.
especially rating guilds.
Yes, and I don't
We
have
don't
a
want to find
problem
the
with
bugs.
that.
We want to find the
But
exploits.
it shouldn't be at the expense of finding the bugs,
Hmm.
the glitches and things like that, because that gives you also, yeah, it might give you an unfair advantage knowing an exploit or a glitch that you can use to go faster towards the end game. In a game like CU, getting an exploit, unless it gives you a huge advantage on the other realms, there is no point in keeping it for yourself because it's just gonna uh, cripple the game itself for
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah, for me, the key differences have been communication, that coordination element. You When you're playing solo, even if you group up, you don't really get the same communication element that you have with guilds, where you already have your pre-established Discord and everything. You're already grouped up. You know everybody. Um, Also, is just the efficiency of it. When we have a guild, you can go, hey, we know when the test is. We're going to have a guild event. We have scheduled it. Then everyone logs in at X time. You're all organized already because again, you know each other. You have the communication. You get in.
Sure.
You grouped up and you go, all right, we know what we're doing in this test. We're going to go take that keep. We've already decided this, so we get everyone up. We know who the group leader is going to be. Everyone's following them, and you're away. You're going. Unless you're leading the group, you really don't have to do anything. It's easy. You just get in. You're like ready to go, kill people. Do. Whereas if you're pugging it, you have to get in and then find a group.
Yeah.
Or
In
just wander
beta,
around
it's
by yourself and shoot
yeah,
things
Make
kind
your
of
own.
uselessly.
Mhm.
Or make your own group and then you have to lead them because
yeah,
someone expects someone to lead it and it's probably going to be
Right.
the person that made
Well,
the
you
group.
started this, right? What are we
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah, you
yeah.
started it. What did you want to do? And that efficiency helps me to test more because I don't have to. I I'm not even though I'm a guild leader, I'm not a super social person. I hate forming groups of pugs. I hate going in a game and just be like, "Who wants to
I hate
join my
bugging
group?"
anyway.
I hate it. I absolutely can't say. That's why I like being in a guild because I can go, "Hey guys, I know all you
Let's
people.
go.
Let's just get in a group, and then someone will make a group, and we can go in it and we can do stuff."
Yeah.
I don't want to go in the game and be like, "Hey, random people, someone invite me to a group." I hate that. It's discouraging to me. It's a barrier I don't want to go across to get and test the game. So then every time I do test, I'm like, I gotta go get a random group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
solo testing. I agree in some ways with Sacrix. Solo testing is not useless, but it doesn't test the synergy and the coordination of different classes. But it is useful for finding holes in the map where
Hmm.
you're going to fall through, uh, glitches in walls, in environment, exploration,
UI
as
tests.
yeah, UI testing and things like that. There are things a solo tester can do to still help the game, even without having to group or anything.
Yeah, so let's get into that. Let's talk about why guilds need to be in testing. Now, I'm not necessarily going to suggest that guilds are the end all be all of testing. As you just mentioned, there are certainly some things that solo testers are needed for. But why do they really need to have a good and cohesive guild experience for testing? And um, yeah, let's just stop there. I was about to
uh,
break into a second question. We'll just stop there.
I think there's a lot of possible reasons for it. One being guilds, like we mentioned earlier, like to schedule these events if they're in as a guild in the beta. That's numbers usually. When they're doing any kind of stress testing, they can get more numbers from guilds who know that the event is gonna happen and they're trying to get in just to test the game. And in any PvP environment that is meant to be competitive,
Numbers.
that has numbers involved, you need that.
Mm.
Uh, what would be the word? You need that benchmark
Yeah.
for competitiveness, the organized group versus the unorganized group. You need to know what is
Mhm.
fully compatible and what the capability of a fully organized hardcore PvP group can bring to this game with what
Exactly.
you've given.
Group of pugs is not going to act as efficiently or
A
as
group of
effectively
thugs
as
is not going
as
to
the
tell you
guild
what
group.
the is not going to be able to test the synergy of the classes as efficiently as an organized group. Not even the hardcore guilds, hardcore PvP guilds. Any organized group, even if they're not in a guild, but a group of friends, group of 8 friends who form a group, are on voice chat together, are used to play together, and actually synergize and coordinate together, are a good benchmark too. But a guild, you have that on a larger scale, and since groups and larger groups in general are going to be the focus of the game rather than the solo play, you need those metrics, you need this feedback, because it's not just about the numbers and the metrics, it's also the player experience. And
Yeah.
a solo player going on a pug is going to tell you about what the solo experience is, but it's not the focus of this game. A guild coming into the test saying, this doesn't work for us, this doesn't work for us, this is great for us, it's a good feedback that they can get on what an organized entity can give them in terms of player experience and group experience feedback.
I mean, you absolutely once you have, as I mentioned, when you put an 8 man, and somebody mentioned in chat as well, you put an 8 man group of pugs up against an 8 man from either a guild, or it doesn't even have to be a guild, but someone's pre-made group of their friends that they know and they play together regularly. They've got their composition down. They're going to have their classes pre-selected. They know what they're all doing. Most likely, the pugs are not going to do nearly as well when you're talking about actually cranking out raw DPS and using the right abilities at the right times and everything. Uh, the organized group is going to do that better, and
Yeah,
especially assuming the game works as intended, is successful, there's going to be big organized groups in
Yes.
the launch. So the
right.
game has to be balanced towards those, because if it's not, then when they get in post launch, they're going to stomp everything.
Not
And
only that, like all the things we just mentioned are a universal idea that I think spans across any and all MMO that has organized play, whether it's
Hmm.
PvP or PvE. This game in particular is publicized as being 2 steps above that.
mm,
It's not just organized group; it's mechanical synergy with the air system,
yes,
as well as um, the level in which you can min max your own personal character in this game via the stat choices and the banes and boons. Not so much that it seems like maybe, but there is a lot of min max in this game that's going to
yes,
affect the team comp versus other MMOs. This
Yeah.
hmm,
so far is turning out to be a very, very uh, choice dependent
yes,
game in a group
Yeah.
environment.
And I'm going to disagree with Chet slightly about the importance of metrics. I don't think that numbers and and running the numbers for combat and everything are the end all. Um, they have it's like statistics. You can interpret statistics and say whatever you want if you really try. You have to interpret them intelligently. But I do think the numbers are critically important. But the important thing is to have the 2 sets of data. They need the solo player data and all the pug data, but they also need the data from having grouped up, organized teams that know each other, that know the game, so that they can really see what the high end of the numbers is, so they can actually set their range, look at their interquartile ranges here, and see what is the average of these, because the
Right.
average of just pugs is not the true average of what's going to be in the game.
Benchmarks.
and
Absolutely.
there's another element to involving the guilds in testing, which is not metrics or balance. It's purely word of mouth for PR, for communication, for recruitment for the game. The more guilds you get that talk about that in their social medias, in a lot of guilds, the big guilds in the gaming community at large, not just for CU, they know each other, they talk to each other. If one of them comes to that game, be it for testing or later on, but if one of them comes to that game, the other ones are going to start looking at the game and maybe come also, and that draws people to the game even more so.
I do think there
Yeah.
are some other methods. For one, as I mentioned, or not methods, but some other reasons that guilds are important. As I mentioned before, involvement. I think that guilds directly correlate to more involvement in the beta. That's something they've said they really want to stimulate. And I do think having the beta rewards and acknowledgments and stuff is great. I don't think that by itself is necessarily going to generate tons of beta participation. Um, I think that having people able to be in consistent groups, having the guild, and they have been putting the working on social systems and putting them in and everything. So I think that's great because we need to have a good system that is easy to use when we go into testing. We can set up the guild and invite people, and we don't get wiped every single time we connect to the server and have to
Yeah.
recreate the guild. So that it's easy to get in and test, because the easier it is to get in and take part in the test, then the more people are going to actually join in and do that.
I think it's also important on that level for any MMO, true as well. A guild that is invested into the beta will likely translate to an investment live. And those are the people, those are the organizations and groups that are fighting for world firsts, for achievements, for anything of prestige level that is endgame content in any MMO. And the developers are going to be seeing these people and having their feedback for what is and isn't working, I think is pretty crucial because they're the ones going to be the long-term investors.
But
Yes.
I absolutely agree, because I think the more attention you pay to the organized guilds, and to some degree it is showing them favor in certain respects.
Yeah.
But I think the more you do that, the more commitment you get from some of them. And
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest examples of this is EVE Online. I mean, you have these large organizations, some of which have been in that game for ages.
Oh yeah.
And the developers really do cater towards the organizations in some ways, and really pay attention to things that they say and their activity and everything, and reward that in some fashions. And that does kind of get reciprocated, I think, by the dedication they have to that. To answer Oldovic's question real quick, do you think CSE will ever get guilds to call themselves orders? No. Our
We are the
community,
order.
well, technically we are, but our guild,
Yeah.
our community actually refers to our competitive guilds as chapters, and we still call ourselves a guild. So
That's
True.
true.
we do not use the
Very
word
true.
chapter
There's no
unless
getting around it
except
in
in our
any
official
environment
stuff.
Yeah.
So
ever.
yeah, I don't think guild is just that. What's the word I want? Not innocuous. It's just the staple. It is the term
Yeah.
that everyone
It is.
uses for what the organizations are, and they can call it whatever they want. I'm fine with the word orders,
It's law
but
binding at this
I'm
point.
not going to call it that.
Yeah. No. I think none of us are gonna be.
I doubt it's ever going to get to a point where most of us are going to call it
Yeah.
orders. I did
I
have one more
yeah.
thing about why guilds need to get in, and this is the question of realm pride.
Yes.
Do you think? What do you think about the notion of guild pride versus realm pride? Is there any sort of a contradiction there?
Yes, there is, and I
Yeah.
like it.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually disagree slightly, but go ahead.
In any competitive environment, even if let's take CU, I guess, as the example. We have a tri-realm system in CU, 3 different factions, many guilds within each faction. Um, Ultimately, you are working for the greater good of the realm.
But
But when it comes down to it, you are subcontracted into your guild, and you are working for the greater good of your guild because you are competitive just by the nature of what pride is. You are competitive with other guilds in your realm, and you are
yeah.
trying to be known for being the best guild in your realm. And I think that's a healthy, friendly competition that is
Mm-hmm.
needed in a PvP environment. And then you take the step back into the realm pride against other factions.
I do think that like I said, I disagree slightly, not entirely, like 50%. I do agree that guild pride can take precedence over realm pride. It can supersede it because it is your closer. I mean, the smaller and more cohesive your social unit is, the more identified you're going to feel with them. That's just
Yeah.
like that's just basic human nature. If you
Mhm.
have a group of 5 friends that are your closest friends, you're going to have more identification with them than you are going to have with a larger social group. With your guilds, you have the possibility of having more guild pride than you have realm pride. I think that's pretty much should be a given.
Yeah.
However, I think that is strongest when there's not much realm pride. Kind of acceding a point to Sacrix a little bit. Um, realm pride in most games, I would say realm pride is not really a thing at all. It doesn't exist. Most
It doesn't
most
exist.
MMOs don't
Most
have that
games,
anymore as a
not
thing.
anymore.
Period.
Mhm.
I disagree. I don't think it's just for casual players. I do think that realm pride plays a role, um, but it depends on the community. In my opinion, I think Realm Pride is a product of a strong community. We have we're going to have alliances. People are going to argue with me in chat whether or not they're alliances or not, but we're going to have
They're coming.
alliances in the game. If those are effective and those are used, then I think there will be Realm Pride, regardless of how strong the Guild Pride is. I think Guild Pride can actually enhance it and take advantage of realm pride to a certain degree.
Sure.
But it requires that coordination. If you don't have the coordination across guilds of people actually working together, then you're probably not going to have realm pride because any success isn't going to be a realm wide success. It's only going to be a guild success. And you go, we did that. The rest of you guys are chumps. You didn't do crap.
I think there's gonna be and we're gonna go with that term actually, an order of pride. I think the first one is always gonna be the guild pride.
Hmm.
Is we did better. We're the ones. We're the reason we won that battle. We're the reason our
Right.
realm is the first one or the best one or whatever. Then I think it depends on the interactions you have, and that's sociology, and that's human nature. If you talk just between the guilds and the people in the realm, you're gonna show your guild pride more than anything else. If you talk to people who are outside of the realm pride becomes more prevalent
Hmm.
because they identify you by your realm rather than just your guild. So there's going to be a mix of all of that, I think.
I think you touched on probably the most important part of that is looking at the concept or the perspective of the enemy. They're not going to see, oh, that Arthurian guy named Brand or Vellic or Kriss is badass. They're going to see a guild tag.
Hmm.
They're
In the
hopefully,
realm, yeah, hopefully.
and they're gonna know a group, an organization by its guild, not by its
Hmm.
faction, because they don't care what faction you're on.
You're
If your
the
tag
enemy,
is red, you're dead. It's the red
exactly.
is dead mentality. They're gonna look for the names associated to that red tag, and that's
Mhm.
gonna be your name and your guild.
Yeah.
Yeah, Oldovic very did a very good job of encapsulating what I was saying and why I think it's relevant to guilds and beta. Realm pride comes from guild and alliance pride, and I would agree with that as a much more succinct way of stating what I was saying. I think that if there are strong alliances, if there is a strong community, which is the goal for some of us,
Mhm.
then I think guild pride does directly feed back up into that or can.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And that's kind of part of the reason why I think that does also go into why guilds should be in beta because the earlier the guilds are in beta interacting with each other, the stronger the initial community is going to be post launch.
Yes.
Because, like, right now, some of us know each other moderately, but I mean, how well can people know each other on forum interaction and a very
right.
occasional Discord interaction?
Yeah.
When we get in game and we actually play and we see that so and so's guild can field 50 people who are effective in combat and can help us
And
take
not
a
just a
keep,
Zerg.
those are the people we're going to go, okay, we want to work with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
But then if we play with them in game and we find out that half of them are jerks, we're going to go, okay, never mind. We don't want to have to
and I
deal with
think
that.
Get away
that
from me.
that's part of also the fine line of realm pride and guild pride. You can be a very successful guild for the betterment of your realm, but if you're jerks about it, there's not going to be a whole lot of realm pride
Yeah.
involved from on everyone else within your realm.
I do think at either rate, I do think realm pride tends to take a side seat to guild pride. I just don't think guild pride necessarily has to subsume it. And I do think it can serve a role in fostering the realm pride
Yes.
over time. Which gets us to my last real question, which is time. When and how do you think CSE needs to work on actually getting the guilds heavily involved in beta?
As early as possible.
That's the vague answer. As soon as beta is not a glorified alpha, the moment beta has
Yes.
the moment
There you
that
go.
beta has group mechanics and working concepts of the things that we do not yet know of, healing, vision, death, resurrection, that kind of stuff. The moment that becomes available, guilds need to be invited.
Yeah, I disagree with Sacrix on this, and I knew I would because I knew what his answer already was. I actually don't think we need guilds in beta 1. I mean, like, I want to have guild as a thing in beta 1 that we can group up, but I don't think there needs to be any kind of a push because we are still missing core game mechanics that they're going to be putting out. They're not worried about class balance right now. So yeah, they want some time to kill stats and everything, and I think getting some of that early data is important. I think having groups would certainly help that, but it's not going to crush my heart if we don't have guilds in beta 1 because, as you said, it's really a glorified alpha that has fancy bells and whistles on it and is now more game-like, which is enough to make it a beta, but it's not a fully developed game experience by any means. I do think beta 2, we absolutely do need guilds in at beta 2 because I think for one core reason, and I think they should really be in at the start of beta 2 and in a full involved way.
At the end of beta 1.
End of beta 1, start of beta 2, for one core reason, it's going to take people time to learn the game. And that's why I don't care about beta 1 so much, because the game isn't the game. What we really need are more or less finalized sort of game mechanics, because once people learn the game in those organized groups, the metrics are all going to change.
Yeah. And
very much.
To branch on what Sakri said, to have the guild, there's no point in having guilds unless you need the bodies, but that you don't need the guild. You need people in general to test. But once you have tests that are more than 5 minutes interactions now and then every other week, you don't really need guild. Once you have real full-on testing sessions of several hours of constant testing, not just skirmishes back and forth, or just we try that, we stop, we analyze, we try that, we stop, we analyze. But leave the servers open, see what happens. But that's not going to happen until end of beta 1, start of beta 2.
If I can interpret a little bit of what I think Sacrix is meaning by all this, is that we're so delayed that it should already be at the point where guilds are a feasible option to throw into testing. And our answers, of course, are knowing that beta 1 is just not going to be in a state of gameplay where guilds are going to be the most benefit or get the most out of that testing. We want it to have been there, obviously, but not the case.
Yeah, I mean, beta 1, I won't say it's a glorified alpha, because it is to a state where I'm comfortable, or it's supposed to be at the state where I'm comfortable calling it a beta, because it is more like a game experience, but it's still missing some core stuff. And everything in there, while not necessarily placeholder, is completely subject to change entirely. We're still missing core physics and systems in the game that are all important to find out what the actual combat stats are going to be in the long run. And so we really need to that's where I think guilds really need to come into play, is once we have not the final mechanics, but something that is at least approaching so that we can start looking at it and we can actually start theory crafting about what is going to be the best build, what is going to be
Mhm.
most efficient and most effective, because that's where the organized groups really start to take off, because they will take all that data, we will run it through and crank out group compositions, and that's where you get that extra 10% in all damage and effectiveness that completely pushes them above
Yeah,
everyone else. If we don't know the mechanics, I mean, the organized group's barely better than a pug group at that point. All we've got is better coordination.
Yeah.
yeah,
If I can take a different path to the same question, kind of taking the opposite opinion now, uh, when we got the beta doc, the beta 1 document,
mhm,
we found out about the dragon circles.
yeah,
We know there's supposed to be these Saturday night sieges
mhm,
eventually coming up, which the way they described these were very competitive,
yeah.
uh,
The,
for
they,
lack of a better word, instances of PvP.
yeah, they
And the fact that
supposedly will
we're
have a leaderboard.
right. And when it comes to that level of competition, I do think guilds should start to get in
Yes.
sooner rather than later because they are now promoting the whole beta duration 1 through 3
Mhm.
as this competitive lore based special thing they made for us to have fun with, quote unquote, which is it's going to be fun, not bagging on that at all. um, but they've actually promoted it as being a competitive PvP kind of fun competition to do beta testing in a non-traditional way. The fact that we're not getting initially the main island and the game in all of its different full states, you probably should actually start to that token inviting guilds in earlier rather than later.
Yeah,
What's the point of having a competitive system called the Dragon Circles if you're not going to involve the competitive organizations to take part in it?
Mhm.
definitely.
Now, one of the questions that comes up in my mind anyway is how to get the guilds involved. I think this is complicated. Um, I think it can be complicated because there are sometimes temptations to go, well, like the Star Wars model, they literally, before they got other people in beta, they literally invited whole guilds and communities.
Yeah,
We pulled in like 90 people from our community into beta testing,
Yeah. I think
and
we got in well before the actual guilds invite beta testing,
yeah.
yeah,
just because of some of the connections we had already made
yeah.
with the
Now,
developers.
And
I don't really think that's necessary for this, because now our experience may be different. Our guild members may be different than other guilds members, but
Absolutely not.
90% of our guild members have beta 1 or higher access.
yes,
So once it goes to beta 1, the majority of our community is in at that point, and
I mean,
all we really
that
need then are guild mechanics. Uh,
that's not even a difference of our guild versus other guilds. That's
the
the
nature of
difference
the
between
backing.
a
yeah,
kickstarted backed game by
Hmm.
the fans versus a private invitation to beta through a AAA developer.
yeah. I agree with Sacrix on that part. A greater communication between the guilds and the devs. Having the devs in your voice comms as you test to give real time feedback. And for the those guilds that don't have people uh, with enough access um, to the game at the moment of the testing, getting those. I know it's not a popular opinion because some people have paid their backer tiers to have this access, but without saying it publicly, because this way people don't join the guilds just to have access to the beta. But inviting a full guild group for one event, say this weekend we need 50 people versus 50 people. If you can field 50 people, even if they don't have beta access, we'll get them in. So we can test that larger scale and everything like that.
Well, I disagree with part of that in that I know for a fact we're having scenario 1 and scenario 2 available at beta 1, and I know that there are objectives. Everyone knows there are objectives tied to those scenarios. In order for that to truly be a beta 1 experience, those objectives have to be working.
Mhm.
And in that case, that means those scenarios now become a competitive play. One of those scenarios is a capture the flag scenario, as listed in the beta 1 doc, which you can all find on the website. That is a very team competitive. It's not even PvP at that point. It's a game. It's much like Hutball in a sense that involves an objective that takes away from PvP, but also includes PvP as far as meeting that objective goal. That's going to be live. That's going to happen. And I think even though while you don't have all the classes in beta 1 and all the mechanics, guilds being competitive about that scenario would be a fun event type thing for them to get involved in.
Yeah, I think as I said, I think that given that it's a Kickstarter game and most people have, I won't say most people, but most people that are in guilds, I would imagine, have beta 1 or higher status. As I said, 90% of the people in our guild has beta 1 status or higher. Very few have beta 2. I would imagine it's the same thing in most organized guilds. So once beta 1 starts, the majority of their people are going to be in. So I don't necessarily think there needs to be anything where they go, hey, let's go invite all these guild people who haven't paid anything into beta. I don't think that's necessary. But what we do need, we have to have the guild system working.
Yes.
By end of beta 1, beta 2, I think is absolutely need a very functional guild system that's not super buggy, alliance system preferably, but also the core thing with that is I don't think we necessarily have as much trouble or problem with having special events where we only invite guilds and stuff if we have a working pre-made group system for the scenarios where we can all get in and make our not just a pre-made group to join in the scenarios, but hey, if we can fill a full raid to do the scenario by ourselves, then we should be able to do that and deploy.
And test within the guild itself.
Yeah, and you get randoms to go against us, that's fine. I don't care. But
you ask for that, but what you don't realize is you're asking for the matchmaking foundation of a battleground system going live, which I know you don't want.
No. Well, no, I will say we are supposed to be able to get in groups to go in the scenarios, though, are we not?
Yes.
So they have to have something. They have to have that anyway. Even though I don't want it, they still have to have it anyway. So all I would want is for us to be able to pull in, if we have the numbers in our guild, to be able to pull in a full raid group to fill in the scenario and either fill in the last little bits with pugs, or we have the numbers and we can just, the opposing side can get pugs. It is matchmaking, but I mean, if they're doing scenarios, then they're going to have, and they want decent participation, they're going to have to do matchmaking anyway, I would assume. Unless every scenario is 300 v 300.
No, it won't be. Some of them
I'm assuming they're I'm assuming they're not all going to be 300 v 300. So, or 100 v 100, I should say. But
yeah, definitely a mix of numbers, both larger and smaller than that number.
But if we're doing that's kind of my point. If we're doing keep sieges, I would like to see a raid size versus raid size keep siege, 40 versus 40 as a scenario, and have it set up with matchmaking so a single guild can fill in their side without breaking up all their groups and everything. So we can group together and do our thing, and whoever they pair us against, well, whatever.
Yeah.
However, I still don't want the scenarios post-launch. Except maybe as a special thing, but I don't want them as a regular thing.
It's happening.
No.
Hope not.
I've said before, depending on the method of implementation for that, could be one of the only things that makes me unsubscribe from the game that I don't have to pay a subscription for.
I would almost wager buying one of you guys your a game of your choice at that moment if it doesn't actually happen, because I'm pretty confident that it's going to happen, but I'm not going to wager that just in case.
Yeah, I'm fine with starter scenario. I mean, we've been over this, so I don't want to digress into it too much. But I'm fine with starter scenarios. I'm fine with scenarios as like a special type event type thing or whatever.
Like a tutorial.
I just don't want it to be a daily thing for general PvP.
I think it's going to be a daily thing for general PvP.
Yeah, I think that's gonna
It's not
completely go against the point of the
yeah,
game.
pretty much. We'll see.
We'll see.
But that's a bit off topic. I would agree also that the backers reward are going to be because gamers like carrots. They like their little
I
shinies,
do like getting things.
their participation tokens. Uh, so it's probably going to pull more people also during beta, uh, with the fact that they will have their little shinies.
Guilds like shinies too. Guilds
Yeah,
like
oh yeah,
server firsts.
Oh god, guilds freaking
oh
are
yeah, no,
obsessed with those.
definitely,
If you tell
definitely.
me that my guild can
As
earn
a
some
player,
awesome
I
some
don't give a
awesome
crap, but yeah,
again, guild pride. If you could tell me that my guild can earn something by participating in beta, I'm going to be sitting there on our forums just every week going, "Why aren't you there?
Mandatory.
it is
I will kick you
mandatory.
out."
It is mandatory. You'll get a warning for not participating.
We're changing our activity requirements. You get in that freaking game. I got to have the little flower pendant.
Yeah. Olvic
For our
asks,
guild banner.
if you think CSE is anti-guild, and that he gets the feeling that some of their group mechanics aren't guild friendly, such as the named warbands,
I don't.
I
may cause friction.
thought that when they released the partial explanation of the warbands and things like that, the group size and types, when they released the partial document for that, I was one of the first voices because I had to translate it. So I read it even before it was published, and I I was the first, one of the first to pull the alert signal on that system saying, no, I'm in the big guild. I'm very guild oriented, and that sounds like you're trying to screw over the guilds over some other things. And so
Yeah.
that's when they actually delayed the publishing and re-explained everything. No, I think they're not guild focused, but they're guild oriented.
I know the first like draft of that. You were like, oh god, it's like I could feel it that you were just like, oh god, it's TSO multi guilding all over again. Uh, and that's kind of the barrier where as soon as you say you can belong to more than one guild, that's where I have the problem. That's the point where I consider the game to be anti guild. Um, having options and things below that where there's still value in having the guild as a unit, and you're not able to just belong in as many guilds as you want, more than one guild and as many guilds as you want and everything like TSO. Anything, once you get below that point, you're at least guild oriented. You may not be necessarily
Yeah.
completely pushing guilds, but I'm fine with that as long as there are still the incentives to join guilds, and I
Yeah.
think we still have
Yes.
that.
I think what it is
NCU.
essentially is a social foundation to provide, like Zacharix mentioned, that flexibility and options that allows guilds in game to organize themselves with warbands for strategy and organization, especially if you start to ask the question when it comes to certain buffs from certain classes, are these realm wide, are these raid wide, are these warband wide? That starts playing into it. It transcends just guild organization. It has other avenues of use, but it gives guilds who largely organize themselves and who have their own sets
Yeah.
of rules, their own requirements to utilize them. And it's up to the guild at that point to say, hey, if you're going to join our guild, don't be in another guild. We use our own warbands. You can't join anyone else's warband.
Yeah.
It's entirely up to the guild, just like
Yeah.
drug testing is entirely up to corporation.
Yeah. Well, that's why I don't have a like the little the war bands being permanent. That doesn't bother me. Honestly, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't care if someone is in a non-guild war band that's permanent. As long as they get in our permanent war band when it's time for our event, I don't care. If I see them in that war band and we're doing an event that they're supposed to be at,
They'll be
then we're
kicked
gonna
out.
have a problem.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
And that's
Bye-bye.
it's very easily fixed.
Yeah, like when we discussed that in the episode when they released the infos, I was part of the scout groups in ESO, and organizing the groups every time we got into Cyrodiil was a pain in the ass. Being able to have the scout group in one permanent group, and those who are here are in the group and can communicate, and they don't have to join several groups to try and organize and everything. You know who's what role they have. Um, I'm
Hmm.
okay with that.
Yeah, I think it could be useful for guilds to have those as a thing, just as it could be useful for pug players who just want to play with like 5 friends and they can organize them in their permanent group. I'm like, sure, whatever. Um, because it's the size. The size doesn't bother me. If it's like an 8 man that's permanent, I don't care. It's not anywhere near guild, and they still don't have all the perks that a guild does. Um, but yes, if we have guild size entities that are permanent, that becomes that you can belong in as many as you want to. That becomes a
Yeah.
problem.
It's basically
Yes.
guilds, yeah.
Yeah,
At
at
that
that
point,
point, it's basically just multi guilding, and
Mhm.
no, that isn't. Well, yes, that does work on a similar concept of you can enforce that. As we found in TISO, we tried to do that in TISO, where we were like, our members cannot belong in more than one guild. If you're in our guild, you're going to be in just our guild. It worked. We were able to do it, and we were able to be successful for quite a while doing it.
Although we needed
over half a
6 more
year.
guilds.
The problem was the one of the core problems was it changed the community that was in that game. The
Yes.
community started becoming full of nothing but people who wanted multi guilds, because a lot of the people who were willing to only play in one guild,
Mhm.
they said screw it and left TISO. And as those
Yeah.
people started filtering out and the game got full of nothing but multi guild people, it got harder and harder to enforce that
Yes.
rule and still
Yeah.
stay competitive.
Well, we did, but there was also the problem was, and that's one of the problems we discussed in the previous episode about the guilds, is that you couldn't see the guild name, and that's a problem for the guild pride. If you are in a guild you're proud of being part of, and you want that to be shown, if you don't show it, you take away some of the pride of belonging to the guild because
You
it
do.
makes it meaningless. So being able, and that's also why guilds need to be involved early on in testing, because that's another, as Vellic said, guilds love their shinies. That's another badge of honor, saying my guild was one of the most active during the beta, and we helped shape that game. We helped make that game better for everybody else. That's the
I hope
kind
I
of
did.
things. Yeah, that's the kind of things guilds live off, literally, because that's one of the things that make you able to recruit new members.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
can say the only thing with the permanent war bands that really kind of bothers me is the possibility of it helping to foster cliques. That's actually my
Yeah.
only real concern
Yes.
is the possibility that when you get in a guild and people who do that, there's a likelihood, there's the possibility of people going, well, we always play together for doing so on and so forth, so we want to have a permanent group. My answer to that is I just won't allow it.
Yeah.
At least in my guild, permanent
Well,
war bands will
it's part
exist.
of our rules anyway.
Well, no. I mean, what I mean
No,
is
yeah, but cliques.
no.
That's
Well, yeah, but what I mean is no personalized use of war bands in the guild.
mhm.
The guild permanent war bands. Now, people could
Yeah,
have
but I
their
mean,
own war band
function
or whatever,
wise,
I
yeah,
guess.
Sure.
So you can't entirely enforce it, but depending on how the permissions work and everything, like if the guild's creating war bands, those will exist only for guild purposes.
yeah,
But I mean, war bands are effectively just a group that exists permanently. So
Right. The
it's
key
effectively a chat room with titles that get us that I guess roles or ranks that get associated with their name. That is it, as far as
and
I'm
maybe
concerned.
possibly buff mechanic limitations if it functions as a
Possibly,
group.
but that's with
The
any group,
bard,
though.
yeah, no. And I think the key distinction to making them not feel like a mini guild or multi guilding is an emphasis on guilds, a reward system or an emphasis system that very clearly designates a guild as being superior than a warband.
yeah. And I've debated that with JB and Mark at length
Yeah.
about the permanent warbands.
Now,
I at this point I know that it will not change
yeah, and
unless there's a mechanics reason for it. They will not budge on that topic.
yeah,
So
there's only one circumstance where I can agree with Sacrix that I do have a problem with the permanent war bands, um, like a serious problem,
mhm,
and that is if they end up deploying it in a way where guilds where there's no perk or advantage to being in a guild that is not
mhm,
shared by a warband,
yeah.
then I would have a problem.
Well,
There, yeah, there
at
have to
least
be
in the documents they released, they did say
exactly,
will not have the same perks and they will be a lot more limited
exactly.
in
So as
their
long as
permissions and things like that than a normal guild.
yeah, as long as they have some limitations and there are some perks and things that full size guilds have that warbands do not, I don't care. Now, yeah, some people are going to make like a little 8-man mini guild and they're going to do stuff and they're not going to care about that stuff they're missing out on, but I don't really care about their 8-man perma guild. I
Yeah,
will roll over them with my 90-person guild
yeah,
and pee all over them. I don't care.
definitely. And I same. I don't have a problem with the unlimited raids. I it's if it's just a raid group, if it's just a group where you can invite more people and you can invite other guilds for practicality, I don't have a problem.
Yeah.
I've had to deal with raids where more than the amount of raid slot we had of people attending.
Hmm.
In EverQuest, the raid was 54 people.
You just make another raid. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. You had to make another raid,
you're still
and
got a big raid. You're still gonna have
yeah,
an
you
even
have
bigger
you just
raid.
have a second. Yeah,
And in our history, at least, with guilds both in beta and in live, our guild or any guild, let's say for that matter, that is leading the PvP cause on the server usually breaks their raid group in half.
yeah,
Half of their group starts one, the other half goes to the other one. That way, they split the balance of their
mhm,
power, their leadership, and they have two distinct raids, both filled with half pugs, half people
mhm,
interested in participating, and then
yeah,
half focused group
Yeah, depending on
in a larger
implementation. I
size.
mean,
yeah,
Yeah,
we have often intentionally split our raid instead of filling it up.
yeah,
But but there have been also times where we fill a raid and we have like 5 or 6 other people left over, and it is kind of irritating to have to go, okay, well, you guys make your own raid and follow along with
mhm,
us, and they're
yeah.
still operating with us. They're still in our same voice chats. They're doing the
right.
same thing we're
They
doing.
just in the game mechanically in a different
Yeah,
mode. That's it.
I will agree though.
Identification.
It is a UI issue. Like, how do you
Mhm,
possibly represent such a huge raid in the
yes,
UI? That's not my problem. That's the developer's problem to figure out.
That is,
And if they
but
do it
that's something we
poorly,
would
then we're
like
gonna bitch about it.
guilds in beta to be able to address
yeah,
and hopefully cause a change in.
Yeah,
yeah. That's another part of.
another reason
That's
guilds
what,
need to be
as
in.
we said, UI testing, guild functions. You will need to test them also.
It's
Certainly.
important to know if the Bard speed buff only affects the other 7 players in his group or not.
Mhm,
In fact, the raid or just the group, we need to know. Because that is something. I mean, we've been over that before and
yeah,
Yes.
50 episodes ago, but that is an issue. It's like, do
yeah.
bards area
It
of
is.
effect buffs? Do they affect the whole raid? Do they affect people in a limited range? What? They've said group. I'm like, group is not an official unit size, so
Yeah.
Is it an order? Is it a warband?
yeah. What is it? Yeah,
They
it's
changed
group
it.
based, but what's a group?
Yeah, it's group based. Which group? You've given us 5 different groups. Which group?
I know they've kind of implied it's 8-man, but
Yeah.
that also bugs me because then what do you have to add an extra group slot for a support class, or
They're not a
have
support
to have
class. They're a combat class.
or you
Yeah.
have to have a support class? Oh, it's a.
It, it is supportive in the role of combat.
That's
But
that's
it
like
is
saying
not a support
that's like saying a
class.
scout is a combat class. Yes,
It's
they
not.
have combat abilities. That does not make them a combat class.
No.
I
Hey,
will admit the support characters have more combat abilities than the scout do.
when your concept art is a loot with giant axes on the side of it, you're a combat class.
Yeah.
Hey, but they said you can't. They did not say you could definitely hit people with that loot. So
True.
Yeah,
Just looks pretty.
it does. It's a fashion statement.
all right. At any rate, I think we've about beaten this topic to death. Beat it into the ground. I think we can summate it
loot.
as obviously the people that are in a guild think guilds are important and need to be in beta pretty early. We at least need the systems to organize and do stuff. Let's see. Eldovic asked a question real quick. How do you see guilds within the game world? Should they be important to the king and rewarded, or
They
simply a
should be.
player-friendly mechanic? I believe what I would like to see, and this goes into the warbands versus guilds thing. I don't
Mhm.
care if a warband has some limited capacity to even claim a territory and build something, or to get realm rewards. However, most of the realm rewards and plot claiming and building of really big
Should go to
keeps
the
should be
guilds.
limited to guilds. That's how I feel about it.
Yes. And being part of the guild should have a boost to your realm awards.
In part because if an 8-man warband can get the materials to build a keep, I think there's something wrong with the game. And so it seems ridiculous that they could ever even do that anyway. So at that point, you might as well just design the system to reward guilds for being organized, and that
Yeah.
would help shut down the argument of warbands
Guild
being
versus
mini
warband.
guilds, because then you
Yeah.
can go, well, guilds are the only ones that can really build or do anything that significant.
Yeah.
Say it would be easy. You have a warband. The warband can only have, say, 4 plots linked together, while the
Think
guilds
about a house.
shouldn't have a limit in the number of plots they can link together.
And the king's rewards, while we know are going to be at the moment on the individual player level
Yeah.
based off of their participation for their realm, the level at which you get rewarded for your participation can be further increased by that participation being
Or
tiered
just
with a guild.
But
or just do guild realm rewards.
well, I was gonna say, I believe they've suggested they're doing realm rewards for specifically for guilds as well. So
Oh, there you go.
Exactly.
That too.
um,
And yes, Acrix is still on track as of yesterday.
yeah, honestly, I agree, Swazi. I don't see the point in having warbands having anything to do with plots. I just thought I'd throw them a bone and go, well, you could have like a small one or something. I don't care.
Yeah.
If Swazi wants to go solo and build his house, he's going to build his house.
Yeah,
He's not doing
it is
that.
possible I could want to do that on my own time and build a house. I don't know.
And I
Autovic
disagree.
has another question.
Yeah, I disagree, Autovic. I think the guild should be the entity, the guild should be rewarded, because being part of the guild in a realm based
I'm not a big fan of buffs.
game, not buffs, but should have guild perks on top of just being part of the guild. The guild itself should have perks, like, say, being able to display not necessarily game wise, mechanics wise,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
but EPIN basically.
Yeah, I mean, even as
being able to display your logo on the banners of the city, of the main city, being able to have, say, a caravan route being linked to your guild made city, from the main city to your guild main city, should be that kind of things that are guild specific.
giant plot for your
Yeah,
guild
giant
keep.
plots.
Being able to tax other players for setting up shops in your giant keep. I'm
Mhm.
fine with that kind of stuff. I don't like buffs, like buffs to leveling like WoW does,
Yeah.
and
No.
buffs to combat systems and stuff. I don't like that because I think it gets into a very touchy area that can really mess with balance and everything. And at that point,
Yes.
guilds are a necessity. And
Mhm.
I do agree with what I think this is what CSE's approach is, and I do actually agree with it. That I think you absolutely need to support guilds, and you need to have them be distinct and useful. but you don't want them to be necessary to enjoy the game and play
Yes.
it and be
Exactly.
on a comparable level with somebody else. And the second you start
And
giving
they won't be.
guilds these buffs and actual combat incentives and or leveling incentives and things,
You made them mandatory.
you start making them mandatory. And at that point, because I don't want everyone to feel like they have to join my guild. I only want really awesome people in my guild. So
Mark Jacobs is on the record as being a solo player, not a 1v1er, but a solo player. He doesn't have the time or energy to just
Join the
find
guild.
groups and stuff. He's designing a game that's going to be available for everybody, no matter what group size you have.
It's okay. I'll go ahead. I'll just publicly state it now. If Mark Jacobs wants to join our guild, he's allowed.
Okay. He still has to go through the interview process.
Of course.
Denied.
Of course.
Technically, you are right. I don't have the ability
Yeah.
to overrule our own interview process. So,
And if he wants to join as a pug, he can.
oh, come on, Pocket. You're awesome. No bag packing. I think guilds are necessary for the game. I don't think guilds are necessary for individual players.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Yeah. At any rate, I think that's about it. So I did want to thank everybody for coming out as usual. If you're watching the recording later, like, subscribe, comment,
this
or
is our
something.
last episode of the season.
This is our last episode of the season. It's a good number to end on, 55. Nice and rounded out and
If
everything.
you have ideas for topics for next season,
Oh god,
Please
yes,
let us
please send
know.
us.
please let us know in the comments below.
This is part of the reason we take like 2 months breaks, because after the end of a season we are so
We need
drained
new
for
info.
ideas. We're like, what are we gonna talk about? I don't know, bunnies?
Yeah,
I don't know.
basically.
Critters. Let's
Cooking.
talk about the need for critters in game.
Well, we need pelts. So
We actually did talk about critters fairly substantially in one episode.
we did.
Even I think it was the crafting episode or something, one of the
Yeah, it
crafting
was.
episodes or something. Anyway,
It was.
at any rate, we'll be in touch. We'll take a break for at least a month, maybe 2 months. We'll let you know. We may have a surprise episode once beta is coming out, if there's anything to actually talk about beta.
Yes,
I would certainly hope so.
I hope so
would
too.
hope so too.
But I mean, they've been very communicative about what's going into beta 1, so that's why I'm kind of like, when it comes out, they may just go, "It's out," and we're like, "Yeah."
There are a number of documents we have yet to see that we've been promised that I'm sure once we
Crafting
find
docs.
out, there will be enough information to have just another random episode.
Yeah, you think we're getting crafting doc before beta 1? That's not
No.
happening.
Oh, he already said no. So
Anyway, it was nice hanging out with everybody. Sorry for
Yeah.
this late start, and we will catch you all at another time.